Hello, everybody. Trying to get myself adjusted here. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to my second episode of New York Giants Corner here at Toilets to Titles. I'm not used to working with these slides over here, so I will get used to it. I'm a quick learner, but it's all new here. And hey, just welcome to the second episode. I'm calling this a catch-up episode. I intended to launch New York Giants Corner here at Toilets to Titles back in early January when the old general manager and head coach were fired, and I was still looking for a new regime. Um, and that would have been perfect time to launch it. I'm not exactly known for my timing. It would have been the perfect time to launch it, obviously, but I had so much going on. It was just after the holidays, very busy with work, but also getting prepared for a lot of the draft content that I've been producing over the past few months for Toilets to Titles, along with my colleagues here too. I've been pumping out a lot of content, but I'm really thrilled and excited to be talking about my favorite team, the New York Giants here. And before we go into the Giants, I just have to lead off with a really sad note. I wanted to be optimistic here, but real news, real life, sad note here. Dwayne Haskins, I just saw a tweet that was shared by Alex here, 12 Titles. Dwayne Haskins, quarterback, who apparently was killed in an accident this morning in South Florida. He was hit by a vehicle. And so I just saw the tweet from Alex had just shared it from it was an Adam Schefter tweet making the announcement that I saw. I saw it like a minute ago, literally. So my condolences to Dwayne Haskins' family. I feel really horrible about that, and it's really bad news. So it's I just wanted to announce that, but bad news. I hate launching an episode on that, but I felt like I should get it out there. It is breaking news. He was killed this morning, I think it was, by he got hit by a car. So my condolences to the Haskins family, and that's really bad news. But anyway, I'm going to move on to my Giants content here. Here is my I'm trying to. Here we go. Well, nope, that's the wrong way. Over here. There we go. Here's my title page for the show. I love it. I created it myself. I think it's a work of art. It's beautiful. And I really love my New York Giants. I'm thrilled to talk about them. Anyway, before I go into the content, if you could please hit the like button, subscribe, give us that 5-star Apple review. Really appreciate it. But especially if you could please subscribe to the channel, Toilets and Titles. Greatly appreciate it. Okay, so anyway, we have so much to talk about. And when it comes to the Giants, it's so easy for me to go off on a tangent. I'm going to try to keep myself focused. And there's just so much to catch up on, too. Again, this is kind of like a catch up episode. So much news over the past few months of the Giants, so many changes. But first, let's talk about Dave Gettleman and head coach Joe Judge. They're done. Obviously, that's not breaking news. They are gone, and it's fine that they're gone. Especially Dave Gettleman. I actually have my own take. That's why I want to talk about it. Most people, their opinions are the same on it, and they're not the wrong opinion. But I have some subtle differences. I just wanted to throw out there real quick. Number one, with Dave Gettleman, when he was fired in December, January, or when he retired, it was definitely time for him to go. It's been 4 years. Couldn't really tell. It didn't seem like the team was trending in the right direction. But I'll say this: I thought he got a lot of unfair nonsense as well. There were people that never liked the hiring to begin with, and they dumped on him from day one, especially in the media. There was like this narrative that was being pushed out consistently. It's just, like every single move this guy made was wrong. Here's the thing: is when Dave Gettleman came in, his first year in 2018, he still had Eli Manning ownership. Ownership wanted to make a final push with Eli. They wanted to see if the 2016 Giants, which where they went 11-5 into playoffs, they wanted to see if that was the real team, or if the 2017 Giants that had something like 4 wins, if that was the real team, because it was pretty much the same roster. They brought Dave Gettleman in. He retooled a few things. He drafted Saquon Barkley. But I really believe that was an ownership thing. I don't think that was Dave Gettleman saying, "Hey guys, hire me and I promise you we're going to get to a Super Bowl with Eli Manning. I don't think that was it. I think Gettleman had a long relationship with the Giants. He used to be, um, I forgot I think he was director of player personnel with the Giants before he became the GM of the Panthers, and he was director of player personnel for a long time with the organization, and he did a very good job when he was with the Giants. And I think ownership, who is very much had the Giants had a good track record for a long time of like 25 years of pretty much success, even maybe even longer than that actually under George Young and then Ernie Accorsi, and they had a process that worked. And so when they fired Jerry Reese, and Jerry Reese at that time deserved to be fired too, in 2000, at the end of the 2017 season, they brought in Dave Gettleman, someone who knew them well, who knew how they do things, knew the organization though. And again, the Giants for a long time had been a very well run organization. They have a losing season here, a losing season there, maybe a two or three season like losing stretch, but for the most part, the Giants actually were one of the best run organizations for a long time. They brought Dave Gettleman. I don't think Dave Gettleman misled them in any way, saying like, "If you hire me, I'll get you the Super Bowl." I think the ownership told them what they wanted. They felt comfortable with Dave Gettleman because they knew him for a long time. He was a general manager at the with the Panthers, and they did go to the Super Bowl during his tenure. So they hired Gettleman, and after the 2018 season, that was a catastrophe. I think they finally realized ownership that is that they needed to rebuild. And so that's when they completely gutted the team. And really, by like 2020, we had hardly anyone left on the team at all. 2000, even 2019, you had hardly anyone left on the team from the Jerry Reese regime. You had Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, and like literally a handful of other people. I mean, Dave Gettleman really, when he took over this team, especially starting in 2019, a lot of people seem to think that 2018 was the rebuild year. No, it was not. That's when they were still going for it stupidly. But again, I think that was an ownership decision. I think 2018 was a catastrophe. Ownership realized they needed to move on. They needed to move on from Eli, but just in general, it was just time to completely overhaul this roster. And so 2019 was when the rebuild really began. And I thought Dave Gettleman, actually did a decent job of collecting some good young talent, and also some young veteran talent like Leo Williams as well. And he brought, in the trade for OBJ, he brought over Jabril Peppers and a first round pick and a third round pick. I thought it was fair value. You can't just replace, one for one a player like OBJ. He's a unique talent. Even though there's a lot of talented wide receivers out there, for the span of like 4 years, he was like a top three wide receiver, deservedly so. And it's very, very hard to replace that talent one for one. It's rare. The Vikings did it recently after they traded their wide receiver. My brain farting on the name right now, but they traded him to the Bills, and then they traded Justin Jefferson. He looks to be like another number one. But that's rare. And quite frankly, the OBJ, my feeling on that is I don't dislike the guy, but I didn't blame them for trading him at all. I saw it coming. I felt like he talked his way off this team. I think it was an ownership decision. I think they were like, we just gave this guy $20 million, $20 million a year contract, something like that. They knew they were moving on from Eli, and who's going to be the face of the franchise at that point? It's going to be OBJ. And this is a guy who kind of had like a bit of a track record of, throwing Eli under the bus at least. I know apparently his teammates like playing with him. Really don't care about the stuff on the field too, like the kicking of the net. I think it was stupid, but I really don't care about that. It's more like the not really taking responsibility for stuff like for example, when he went on the boat trip before the 2016 playoffs, wound up dropping at least one, if not two touchdown passes, had a really, really bad game. And then later on, a year or two later, kind of subtly throws Eli under the bus in a way on a radio program, just stupid crap like that. When he was traded, I felt the same way about Jeremy Shockey when they traded him in 2008. It's just not the type of player I like. And I realize a lot of fans like him. They like him a lot. I would have loved for him to stay if he could, comport himself correctly, act like a professional. You're making like $20 million a year. You're an NFL, star. Act like it. Act like it, man. Act like it. And I don't think OBJ really was. I don't think he acted like it. So when they moved on, I understood. I didn't really have a problem with it. But Gettleman, I thought, totally overhauling a team from scratch is not easy. And by the time his tenure ended, I thought they had actually done a good job of like really strengthening some units. Like you look on the defensive side of the ball, I thought the secondary was pretty darn loaded, especially at safety. But it was pretty darn loaded between draft and free agency. Uh, the defensive line in terms of Leo Williams and Dalvin Tomlinson. Unfortunately, I moved on from him a year ago, but you had Leo Williams at one point. You had Leo Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson, Dexter Lawrence, and you had B.J. Hill, who they stupidly traded this year for a crappy center from the Bengals. And B.J. Hill just got a huge contract extension from the Bengals. But at some point, that line was really, really loaded too. And he also, I thought Dave Gettleman's drafts overall were good. I mean, the real controversial picks were always the first round picks, always the first round picks. But I felt like I felt like the rest of the draft, you have to separate the first round picks from the rest of the draft. When his picks were made at the time in rounds 2 through 7, there were no reaches there. Will Hernandez was not a reach in the second round. Lorenzo Carter was not a reach in the third round. B.J. Hill was not a reach in the back end of the third round. Azeez Ojulari certainly wasn't a reach in the second round last year. You could say Kadarius Toney was in the first. But like I said, the first round picks were different. Barkley, of course. Should you take a running back at pick number 2? I wouldn't have done that. I would have traded back, taken the deal that the Jets had gotten. You move back to the deal from the Colts, move back to number, was it the deal that the Colts got from the Jets, where you move back to number 6 and you get a slew of second round picks? I would have done that. Um, but then again, you look at like what Barkley did after his rookie year. After what he did in his rookie year, honestly, I had no problem with I had no problem with that pick in hindsight after the rookie year. Because the guy put up like 2,000 all-purpose yards in his rookie season. He was phenomenal, Saquon Barkley. And then Daniel Jones. Listen, I'm one of the last guys in the Daniel Jones bunker within Fort Daniel Jones on Daniel Jones Mountain with the Danny Dimes flag waving high. I'm one of those guys. But if the Giants decide to move on from him, this year, if they decide to draft like Malik Willis, for example, or if they want to move on next year, even if they want to move on this year, I get it. It's a new regime. There is a timing thing here going on where, the rookie contract, he hasn't proven himself. I believe in the guy, but I feel like I've seen enough where I think this guy can be a franchise quarterback. I'm not saying an elite quarterback, but a good quarterback, stable quarterback that you can build the rest of the team around. He's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, but I think he can still be a good quarterback. But you know what? I can't point to the numbers. I can't point to the metrics. I can't point to the wins. I can't point to the touchdown numbers. I can't. I can't point to that. So if they want to move on, I get it. But I think this guy really does have the talent to succeed if the system he's in is functional, and if the pieces around him aren't just good, but if they stay on the damn field. I mean, they're always injured. The offensive line, and that was Gettleman's biggest mistake, was not addressing the offensive line well enough, consistently. Just didn't do it, and which is a surprise because that was like the number one thing he came into the Giants organization talking about. Anyway, Joe Judge, I do agree with Mara, the owner Mara, that there is a good head coach in Joe Judge. But I think he got undermined by a bunch of things. And he brought it on himself too. I mean, this offense that we saw for the past 2 years, people want to blame Jason Garrett or just Jason Garrett. It's not just Jason Garrett. This is Joe Judge's offense. This is what he wanted. For the Giants last year and last year's draft, the 2021 draft, that was a really deep draft in terms of offensive linemen. To not come out of that draft with at least one offensive lineman in any round was malpractice. And Joe Judge, just like Dave Gettleman, Joe Judge had a part in that. Dave Gettleman, people always said like he said everything you possibly could about this guy, and it was inconsistent too. People would say Dave Gettleman was a general manager who didn't listen to anyone else. He ruled with an iron fist, and that's not true. You can look at players that selected. You can look at the free agents. He clearly listened to his coaches. You look at like the first defensive coordinator who came over from the Arizona Cardinals. They were signing all the free agents for Arizona Cardinals. Apparently Pat Shermer, who I didn't think should have been fired after 2 years. Pat Shermer apparently, basically broke into Dave Gettleman's office, barged through the front door, and demanded that they trade up for DeAndre Baker. And so they traded up and drafted DeAndre Baker. It doesn't sound like a guy who rules with an iron fist and doesn't listen to other people. So I think there was a lot of crap out there about Dave Gettleman. Maybe he's a horrible, a bad GM, and he probably was. Okay, so, but there was a lot of crap out there about him. And I think it was just nonsense, absolute nonsense. And there was this narrative that had been pushed from day one against this guy. Yeah, I remember the thing about the Daniel Jones, selection pick number 6, and reporters had asked, why you drafted him, and he gave a bunch of reasons. But the only thing they focused on was the last one he gave, and that was that he went to the Senior Bowl. He saw Daniel Jones throw like a few passes, and he was like, I was in full bloom love. I saw enough and I left. And then reporters made it sound like, you know, like he never, watched Daniel Jones play. Like he never reviewed tape on this guy. Like he didn't meet with him. He didn't read up on this guy. He didn't read scouting reports on this guy. He did. He did. But the media for some reason focused on, they put out this BS narrative that all he did was, just see like Daniel Jones throw a few passes in the Senior Bowl, and that's why he drafted him with the number 6 pick. That's baloney. There's a total lie and a fake narrative, and the media does that all the time, including in sports. It's disgusting. But anyway, Gettleman deserved to be fired. Don't get me wrong. It was time. It was time to move on. Joe Judge, he dug his own grave too. I think he had a big part in the offense, how the offense was crafted. The Giants' defense the past 2 years is pretty darn good. It wasn't great, but I thought they did well with the pieces that they had overall. They still, didn't have the pass rush that they needed. They were not deep at linebacker at all. But I thought overall the defense was pretty good. He had a good defensive coordinator, but the offensive side of the ball, that was malpractice, and Joe Judge had his fingerprints all over that as well. So if they had kept him a third, if they kept him a third year, I would have understood. But you know what? I had no problem with him being fired. It was time to move on. So anyway, I went on way too long about Gettleman and Joe Judge. That was really worthy of another episode, but I'm trying to squeeze in quite a bit here. Let's move on to our new front office and our new coaches. All right, so let's talk about the Joe Schoen, who's the new general manager, and assistant general manager Brandon Brown. Now, the process, I like the process. The Giants seemingly took their time. They interviewed a lot of like top level candidates that were really popular in NFL circles. One of them was Joe Schoen. Another one, I think his name is Adam Peters from the 49ers. They also interviewed Ryan Poles from the Chiefs, who eventually got the job, who soon after this got the job as the general manager of the Chicago Bears. Um, there was a gentleman from the front office of Tennessee Titans as well, and a few others as well. It was really, really good. I do think Joe Schoen was baked into the cake from the beginning. Not that it was 100% determined, but I think Joe Schoen was the pick from day one. And, all the other candidates were going to have to blow ownership socks off away. They have to blow their socks off to not go with Joe Schoen. It's my understanding they had been in touch with and speaking with Joe Schoen for months before the end of last season. So, but I think they did do their due diligence where they interviewed these other really good candidates. Again, I think these other candidates like Peters and Poles, they would have had to really, really blown ownership socks off to not hire Joe Schoen. And I think once Joe Schoen was hired, Brian Daboll was baked into the cake, which will lead us to Brian Flores, the allegations, his complaint against the organization. I'm going to address that in a little while. I just want to go through the new regime, the new coaches, real quickly. So I do like to hire Joe Schoen. I will have to say this: there is one thing that worries me about. And it's not just Joe Schoen. It would have been the same thing if it was Ryan Poles from the Kansas City Chiefs as well. Um, I do get a little worried about hiring people, whether it's coaches or front office staff, like a general manager. When you hire them from organizations that have awesome quarterbacks, I get worried that's like when someone says like, oh, like I remember, for example, when the Giants hired as their offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo back in like 2015 or 14. They hired him from the Green Bay Packers. Ooh, they're like, ooh, Ben McAdoo, Green Bay Packers. And my thinking was, so what? I mean, we all know even at that point, like 2014, 2015, we all know it's really not the Green Bay Packers. It's really the Green Bay Aaron Rodgers. That team was really not a very good team. The Packers are a good, solid team now. They have a good defense. They've got a legitimate running game with Aaron Jones and a few other people too, and to help Aaron Rodgers. But at that point, it was clear as day for a long time. It was Aaron Rodgers. And that was it. So I wasn't really all that impressed with the hiring of Ben McAdoo. Nothing against him, but it wasn't like I was going to be like, oh my God, this guy really proved so much to me, that he deserved to be hired as the offensive coordinator for the Giants. I think the same thing goes with front office personnel, like a general manager. Like I get scared, like not scared. I'm wait and see. I am wait and see with Joe Shane. That's nothing against Joe Shane. I would have probably felt more like I don't know, maybe more comfortable if we hired the guy from Tennessee. Because Tennessee is a team that does not rely on their quarterback. Ryan Tannehill's pretty good, but I think it's been proven by now, even though he's had a good career with Tennessee, he's not an elite quarterback, and he's never going to be. But he's good. But the rest of the team is really, really solid. Great running game. Some talented, a talented wide receiver in AJ Brown, and they've got a pretty good defense, and they've got a really good head coach. So that's again, I'm not knocking Joe Shane. It's just that when it comes to someone, coming from an organization that has a top three or top five quarterback, I get a little worried that really most of it's kind of about the quarterback. And so, but I do think the Bills are a well-run organization. I think they have a good roster, but I do get worried about that. Okay, but there is a good theme here, though, that I like that Joe Shane's doing. First of all, he came from the Bills. They've been very good for the past few years. I hope it's not just 90% because of Josh Allen, but he's coming from an organization that's doing well. He hired assistant general manager Brandon Brown from the Eagles. I never heard of Brandon Brown until the Giants hired him, but he's 33 years old. And let me get the picture up over here. This is from all these images are pretty much from Giants.com. They you know what? Hang on one second. I'm sorry, I have an emergency that just came up. Hang on one second. I apologize. Something was going on with my dog. He was getting into something, and there was no one else here in the house to help me with that. So very unprofessional, but I had to do it. Anyway, people. So Brandon Brown, 33 years old. Can you imagine being 33 years old and being an assistant general manager of a team? Amazing. So I didn't know. I never heard of this guy until he was hired. But what I like is that he came from another organization. He was poached from another organization that is really well run. And it's funny. I remember just like maybe a year, 2 years ago, fellow Giants fans of mine were crowing that the Eagles were about to enter cap hell because they had all these backloaded contracts and um, and they were looked like they were going to have cap problems. No one's saying that anymore. The Eagles did very well with the draft last year in terms of the amount of draft picks they had. They're well stocked this year with two first round picks, and they actually originally had three, and they traded one of. They made a massive trade with the Saints, where the Eagles now have two first round picks this year, but they're also going to have two next year as well. They also have a bunch of later round picks, like second, third, fourth round picks. The Eagles are in position to control this draft and next year's draft as well. So, oh, geez, my dog is bugging me. Like I said, there's no one else here to help me. So, but anyway, so I like that they poached this guy from the Eagles. I assume he's a really good, young, bright mind. But again, they poached someone else from a really well-run organization. And it's getting a little dark in here. I put some light on. All right, Brian Daboll. Okay, let's move on to the head coach. So again, I'm not going to spend too much on Brian Daboll. He's never been a head coach before. I am excited about the hire because he's definitely considered a bright young mind, and not young mind, but he's definitely considered a bright mind. Definitely a rising name in NFL circles. All right, I got to take care of my dog. Hang on one second. Sorry, guys. Okay, I apologize. Next time I do one of these live episodes and I've got no one else in the house to take care of my dog, I'll make sure I give him a bone to keep him occupied. Anyway, let's see if I can make it through the rest of this episode without being interrupted by Melvin. So Brian Daboll. So again, once Shane was hired, I think the Daboll hiring was once he was hired as general manager. I think the Daboll hiring as head coach was kind of baked into the cake, and that's fine. I think this is good hiring. It makes sense. And that's what I like about all these hirings. This cycle is that they all make sense. They all come from well-run organizations that have been winning over the past few years. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. If they keep Daniel Jones, I'm not 100% convinced that they're keeping Daniel Jones this year. That's what they've been saying. That's what they've been making it sound like. But I would not be shocked if they take a quarterback at the number 5 pick. That's all I'm saying. That if Malik Willis is there, I would not be shocked. Maybe Kenny Pickett. I'm not a Kenny Pickett myself. I'm not sold on Malik Willis. I think he's got. If someone wants to draft him early, I get it because the guy's ceiling is really, really high. I wouldn't be surprised if the Giants do draft Malik Willis at number 5. I'm not predicting that they will. I'm just saying I'd say there's like a 25% chance they do draft a quarterback at number 5 this year. And if they do, it's probably going to be Willis. So they can sit him on the bench for a year behind either Jones or Tyrod Taylor and sit him on the bench because he's going to need to sit on the bench pretty much for a year. This guy's got a lot of growth. He needs a lot of growth. He needs some time. So, but anyway, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think it's a realistic chance. But regardless, I want to see this offense just be capable. You don't have to be elite. I'm not expecting elite offensive play this year, but just a friggin' competent. What we saw over the past 2 years from the offense was disgusting. And it was the same thing that we saw from the defense the 2 years before that. But again, that's when the rebuild had first started, and they really had no names on defense at all. No names. But what he saw over the past 2 years, you had talent on the offense, especially last year, and to perform it the way they did, even before Daniel Jones got injured, was just disgusting. It was disgusting. And so I expect to at least see confidence here with Daboll. And he is going to be the play caller, is my understanding, at least for this year, which I'm not crazy about that. But I guess I get it. I like the head coach just to be the head coach. But then again, I have no problem if Andy Reid is calling plays either. But Andy Reid has a long track record. Same thing with Bill Belichick on the defensive side of the ball. That's a long track record of success. So anyway, I am happy with the Brian Daboll signing. I'm happy with Joe Shane, Brandon Brown, Brian Daboll. I am adopting very much a wait and see on all of this. I am an optimistic fan, Giants fan by nature. But when I say optimistic, it's not rosy glasses, rose-colored glasses that I'm looking through. I'm not rejecting reality. I'm not ignoring negatives. I'm not. But I'm just got to see. This organization had better seriously address this offensive line in this draft class seriously. And I'm not saying talking like waiting just till the third round to take your first offensive lineman in this draft class. And just, yet again, just saying and thinking, and you probably believe it that, well, we can just, just with our staff, we'll be able to train these guys up. I think normally that would be the case, but the Giants haven't been able to do that in 10 years, regardless of who the general manager or the head coach or the offensive or who the offensive line coaches have been. It hasn't mattered. I've never seen anything like this in my life for a 10-year period where you can't have at least a pretty good offensive line. It's ridiculous. So until the Giants, under any general manager, under any coaching staff, until the Giants can actually prove that they can assemble a pretty good offensive line, I'm not going to believe that it can be done until they can prove it, regardless of whoever they hire. But Brian Daboll makes sense. I am happy that he's the head coach. I would have been happy with some other options as well, but I was happy with Brian Daboll. And again, when Joe Shane was hired as the GM, um, I think Daboll being the head coach was pretty much baked into the cake. It was pretty much written in stone it was going to happen. Okay, so let's move on to the other, to the coordinators. We got Mike Kafka, Wink, Don Martindale, Thomas McGahee. So Thomas McGahee, when we move on over here, Thomas McGahee was retained. He's been the Giants special teams coordinator for quite a few years now. I forgot how many years, but he's survived a few regime changes, and he's done a good job with the Giants special teams overall. Wink Martindale, I'm very excited about Wink Martindale. He was a guy who was interviewed for the head coaching position a few years ago when Joe Judge got the job. Wink Martindale, very excited to see what he does with the Giants, and in a long track record of success with the Ravens for like the past like 8 years. I think it's been that he was the DC for the Ravens. And you know what? Always love how the Ravens do things. That is an organization that you want to emulate because year in and year out, they are in the thick of things, and they're usually making the playoffs. And they're just a hard-nosed team. Honestly, if I didn't grow up a Giants fan, if I were going to start being a football fan right now, I'd probably wind up being a Ravens fan because I love the mentality of that team. They're a tough team. They're rugged. Every single year, they're in the thick of things, and 90% of the time, it seems like they're in the playoffs. And Mike Kafka, new offensive coordinator, came over from the Chiefs, came over from Andy Reid. I don't know if he's going to be the play caller right now. I think Brian Daboll, I have a feeling Brian Daboll is going to be the play caller. So Kafka, kind of like the Chiefs offensive coordinator over there right now for the past few years. I forgot his name, but he's not the play caller. In Kansas City, their offensive coordinator, it is Andy Reid. And I think Andy Reid, a few months ago, was saying that because the offensive coordinator of the Chiefs hasn't been getting hired as a head coach over the past few coaching cycles over the past few seasons. He's been getting interviews, but he hasn't been getting hired. And the knock has been that one of the knocks at least has been that that guy he's not calling plays for the Chiefs as the offensive coordinator. It's Andy Reid. And Andy Reid a few months ago said, well, he is calling plays bullshit. No, he's not. He's not calling the plays. Andy Reid just flat out lied. He's not calling the plays. Andy Reid's calling the plays. I didn't like that he said that either, because I think the way Andy Reid is running his the offense over in Kansas City is detrimental to the guy who is the offensive coordinator. So I think Andy Reid's full of crap. I like Andy Reid, but I think he's full of crap. He is calling the damn plays in Kansas City, which is fine because he's a great play caller and they've got a great offense, and that's totally fine. But don't say that your offensive coordinator is calling the plays when he's not, and everybody knows it too. And I think that is detrimental to this guy. And again, I'm brain farting on the offensive coordinator's name at Kansas City, but that is detrimental to this guy getting a head coaching position. So Andy Reid was full of crap on that. He is the one calling the plays in Kansas City. Mike Kafka, I believe, was I believe the quarterbacks coach at Kansas City. And so they poached him to be the offensive coordinator. But again, I think he may be in a similar situation as the Kansas City OC in that he's not going to be calling plays, at least not this year. That could change. It sounds like Brian Daboll hasn't made the decision. It's not set in concrete yet, but I have a feeling Daboll is going to be calling the plays this year, which is fine. But I would like to see Kafka eventually take over the play calling, and I think it's only right. I like to see the head coach just be the head coach, but I think it's only right. It's only fair that the offensive coordinator becomes the play caller. Otherwise, why give him the title? To be honest with you, that is one thing that annoys me about Andy Reid. He's full of crap on that part anyway. So anyway, these are really. Look at the theme here. You got Joe Shane from Buffalo winning an organization the past few years. Brandon Brown, the Eagles, winning an organization for a long time. And the Eagles are very much like the Ravens in that they're a tough team, and they always seem to restock well. And the Eagles are in the process of restocking well. They are restocking. They're loaded up with draft picks. They're good to go. So they got Brandon Brown from the Eagles. You got Brian Daboll from the Bills, just like Joe Schoen, and now you got Wink Martindale from the Ravens, one of the best defensive teams consistently for what the past 20 years at least. Mike Kafka from the Kansas City Chiefs. You know, the Andy Reid system. It's like Andy Reid's system's great, and Andy Reid's got a great coaching tree. Unlike Belichick, Andy Reid has a great coaching tree, and Kafka's coming from that system. It just makes sense. I like the programs that these coordinators are coming from, and the general manager and the assistant general manager. It just makes sense. And McGahee staying on as special teams coordinator, he's good. He's done a good job. He's done a good job as the special teams coordinator for the Giants for quite a while now. Anyway, I just want to throw these pictures into regarding regarding Wink Martindale. This is how a defensive coordinator should look, right? Am I right? Am I right? I know I'm right. It's a rhetorical question. I know I'm right. This is how you want your defensive coordinator to look like, right? Here's another one too. I like this one over here. If I can get this. What's going on? Okay. Look at that. Look at that mullet. How can you not love that mullet? That's how a DC should look like. He looks mean. He looks like he's ready to go, right? He looks like he's ready to lead people into battle, doesn't he? Uh, another interesting, um, another interesting hire here too is Laura Young, who also came over from Buffalo. She's the director of coaching operations for the Giants. She came over from the Bills as well. Laura Young, I wanted to point her out because obviously, you know, she's a woman, and we're starting to see more and more women in the NFL, in the front office, but also on the sidelines as well as coaches. And she's listed on the coaching staff. I mean, she's not. I believe the Jets have like an assistant offensive coach who's a woman. I forgot her name. And I think she came over from the 49ers, but she's actually like an assistant, I think, like assistant offensive coach, I believe. And she's on the Jets. Laura Young, her title is director of coaching operations. I don't think she's really she's not calling plays or designing plays. It's my understanding she's not doing anything like that. I'm just going to read from the Giants website here. Apparently, Laura Young is the team's director of coaching operations. She's involved in every aspect of football operations, including coordinating slash organizing practice, as well as game day operations. Um, Quote from Daboll, Brian Daboll, she'll have her hands all over the organization in terms of the coaching side. So, what exactly that means, I'm not really sure, but I think it's exciting that we're starting to see, and it's not many, but we're starting to see more and more women enter the NFL on both the front office side as well as the coaching side. Um, because listen, that's we need good brains out there. I think there's a lot of like really bad coaching out there in the in the NFL, and so if we can get more brains out there, more good brains out there to choose from, to put in the front office or even on the sidelines as coaches. That's great because I think there's a lot of really bad coaches out there, and I think there's a lot of really bad front office personnel as well. And I think that the talent pool has been pretty limited that teams have been pulling from. So I'm really happy to see this. I hope there are more and more women coming in to the front office and coaching as time goes on. Now, I want to move on to something I did not want to ignore: the Brian Flores allegations. Let me get rid of this over here. The Brian Flores allegations. Brian Flores, I don't blame you at all for bringing the complaint that you brought, the lawsuit that you brought against the Giants. It's really against the Giants and the NFL as a whole. I don't blame you, especially given the text messages that you received from Bill Belichick. I don't blame you one bit for bringing that complaint against the NFL and the Giants. If I were you, I would do too, because it didn't sound right. It didn't seem right at all, and it doesn't sit right with me either. I will say this: I don't think the Giants are racist. I don't think Giants ownership is racist. I don't think, just based on, I don't know. I don't know ownership. I'm not in their minds. I'm not in their family. I'm not in rooms with them. I don't have discussions with them. But just based on, actions in the past and things they've said in the past, nothing they've ever done leads me to believe that they're racist or they're making decisions based on race. I don't believe that. However, if I'm Brian Flores, I get it. You know, just because I don't think someone's racist doesn't mean that I'm right. You get a text message. I'm not going to go into the whole text message thing, the description, but I'm sure you're familiar with it already. But the text message you got from Bill Belichick, based on that alone, I don't blame you for bringing this. Because here's the thing too, and it just doesn't sit right with me, and I don't think it sits right with most people, is that I can look at the Giants and be like, oh, you know what? I don't think they're racist. The hiring of Joe Shane and Brian Dable, like this stuff makes sense. Like hiring Brian Dable does make sense. They also hired Joe Shane to begin with as a general manager, and it only makes sense that he's bringing along his guy that he has a relationship with in Brian Dable, who was a hot head coaching commodity. So very well respected and very much desired, I think, by many organizations, at least for interviews. So he was definitely a rising candidate, a rising star as a head coach potential there. So the hiring of Brian Daboll makes sense. But here's my problem too, is that you can make that argument for every single NFL team, like the hirings that they make for their coaching staff or general manager or what have you, any type of coaching position. You can always make these logical, reasonable arguments where just taken one at a time, they seem right. They don't seem racist. They seem logical. But when you look at the NFLs, when you step back and then you take a look at the NFL as a whole, and you see the utter lack of African American um, coaches, especially head coaches and general managers, given that this league has got to be, I don't know the exact number, I'm just guessing that the league is like 65% of the players are African American, and I'm just assuming that's the number. Could be a little less, could be a little more, could be a lot more. I'm unsure. But let's say it's at least 65% or at least 60%, probably 65% African American. And then how many head coaches do we have right now? It's like what, two, maybe three? Uh, it's not right. It's not right. And I don't know what the solution is. I don't believe that having some sort of like I don't know, like number set in stone where it's by law the NFL, teams that have to be at least 15 or 16 or 20 or 25 teams that have African American or non-white coaches. Like I don't believe in something like that, but this isn't right either, where you've got a league that's something like where 65% of the players are African American, yet you only have two head coaches. There are plenty of good black coaching candidates out there every single year to choose from, and also for front office personnel as well, plenty to choose from. I'm really focused on the coaching side because I think that's the most egregious. But listen, there's an utter lack of African Americans, especially as general managers as well. There's not many black general managers right now, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable. And so again, while I believe that the Giants front office ownership isn't racist, again, I don't know that for a fact. But it's not just about the Giants; it's about the entire NFL. And and it's just not right. And I almost didn't want to talk about this just because I feel like people automatically jump on like as soon as one person screams racism, plenty of other people without thinking about anything at all just will jump on board and just scream racism. And I think there are other people out there who will jump on board and just to say I'm not a racist. Look at me, I'm not a racist. I'm not a racist, without really stepping back and thinking about anything, the nuances involved. But listen, there's something that can't be ignored is that the NFL, you need to have more African American head coaches, other coaches in general, generally speaking as well, and more African Americans in the front office. And I don't think, I mean, if I'm a team like the Giants, I'd be seriously thinking about like, say Brian Dable does crash and burn in 2 years. I'd be thinking internally, I wouldn't make necessarily a public statement, but I'd be thinking internally that, you know what? Next head coach is going to be African American because there are plenty, no matter what, because there are plenty of African American coaches to choose from. And the Giants have never had an African American head coach. Um, and it's time to do that. So if Dable flames out like in 2 years, if I were Giants ownership, I would really set it in my mind that my next coach is going to be African American. There are plenty of good ones to choose from. Get it done. And the NFL needs more African American head coaches. It does. It's just not right. It's very uncomfortable to see. I don't know if it's like I don't think it's outright racism involved. I don't think that. But then again, I don't know these people, you know, and but I'm uncomfortable seeing this, and I'm kind of sick and tired of seeing, a lack of head coaches who are African American in the NFL. Anyway, guys, okay, that's my catch-up episode for what happened with our beloved New York Giants over the past few months. I'm sorry that it's taken this long. I am going to put out more and more Giants content consistently now. I promise you. Um, where you can find our show: Apple Podcast, YouTube, Facebook, Podbean, and Spotify. Spotify. We have two Facebook pages. One is Toilets to Titles, and the other is When a Family Breaks, as you see down here in the yellow bar. When a Family Breaks. That's our Facebook page dedicated to the trading of sports memorabilia. Anyway, guys, also we have if you go to patreon.com/toilets to titles, you can learn how you can further support the show, and we've got our website that has all of our videos, articles, tons of fantasy, NFL, NCAA football, and draft content. We're putting out a lot of draft content out right now. Obviously, with the draft coming up this month, we've been really pumping out videos over the past few months, starting in January, and articles as well. Articles as well. So check it out. That's where we have. It's where we house all of our stuff. Also, last but not least, here are the Twitter handles for me and like my 14 or 15 other colleagues here at Toilets and Titles. Anyway, guys, that's a wrap for the show for today. Anyway, so like I said, I'll be back with more content pretty soon. Again, this is Joe. The show is New York Giants Corner at Toilets to Titles. Take care. Have a great weekend, and I'll catch you soon. And go Giants.